The first time he threatened to kill us, I was standing in my kitchen, holding a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. He didn't say it to my face, he said it to my mother, and by the time she repeated his words to me over the phone, something inside me had already changed. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 39 years old, and for most of my adult life, people have made the same mistake about me. They look at the quiet version first. The woman who keeps her lawn trimmed, remembers birthdays, smiles politely at neighbors, and never says much about her past. They see someone ordinary, predictable, easy to understand. What they don't see is that before I came back home for good, I spent 11 years in military special operations. I worked in places where hesitation got people killed, where reading danger a second too late could cost more than your own life. I learned how to stay calm when the room changed. I learned how to listen to silence. And I learned that the most dangerous people are often the ones who seem the most harmless when you first meet them. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. My mother, Ellen Bennett, had always been the softest, strong person I knew. She wasn't loud. She wasn't confrontational. She was the kind of woman who could make a whole house feel safe just by being inside it. After my father died, she spent years learning how to live around his absence without letting it harden her. She kept the same china cabinet, the same Sunday routines, the same little tomato plants on the back porch. Then, 3 years ago, she met Scott Mercer. At first, he looked like the answer to a prayer no one had said out loud. He was polished, attentive, the kind of man who knew exactly how to behave in public. He brought flowers for no reason. He called my mother Angel in a low, easy voice. He remembered small details and turned them into performances. The first time I met him, he shook my hand with too much confidence and looked me straight in the eye for just a second too long. Most people would have missed it. I didn't. There was something rehearsed about him. Not fake exactly, more like practiced. Like every smile had already been tested before it reached you. I told myself not to overreact. My mother looked happy, truly happy. And after so many quiet years, I wanted that for her. I wanted to believe the uneasy feeling in my chest was nothing more than old instincts refusing to retire. So I stayed out of it. That's the part that still bothers me, because once they got married, things didn't go bad all at once. They went bad the way water damage spreads behind a wall. Slow enough to deny, quiet enough to excuse. Scott started by taking over little things. Bills, insurance, repairs. He said my mother had enough on her plate and shouldn't have to worry about numbers. Then he started screening her calls. If I phoned in the evening, he answered more often than she did. If I asked to speak with her, he'd say she was resting, showering, out back, busy. And when I finally got her alone, something in her voice had changed. She sounded careful, not tired, not distracted. Careful, like every sentence had to pass through a checkpoint before she let it out. I should have driven down there sooner. I know that now. But distance makes denial easier, and I lived 5 hours away. It was simple to tell myself I was imagining patterns, that marriages went through rough patches, that my mother would tell me if something was truly wrong. Then one Thursday night in April, she finally did. She called me a little after 10. At first, all I heard was breathing. Shaky, uneven breathing. Then crying. Then my name, broken in half. I stood up so fast my chair tipped over behind me. "Mom," I said, already reaching for my keys. "Tell me where you are." She tried to speak twice before the words came out clearly enough for me to understand them. Scott had hit her. Not by accident. Not in anger that got out of hand. Not in some confused blur he could explain away later. He had hit her, and it was not the first time. The room around me went completely still. I asked if he was there. She said no. He had gone out. I asked if she was bleeding. She said no. I asked if she could leave right now. And that's when she said the one thing I didn't expect. Not yet. I thought I had heard her wrong. I hadn't. She told me she needed 3 days. 3 days, she said, and then she would explain everything. If you've never heard your own mother ask for time while admitting she's in danger, I hope you never do. It is a helpless kind of fury, the kind that makes your hands shake while your voice gets colder and calmer. I argued. Then I pleaded. Then I tried command, the same tone that had worked on younger operators in harder places than this. She didn't move. "Trust me," she said. And then, after a pause that still lives in my memory, she added, "I have been paying attention." She was. Over the next 72 hours, while Scott still believed he was in control, my mother built a case. She photographed bruises before the color changed. She copied bank statements. She forwarded emails to an account he didn't know existed. She wrote down dates, times, threats, and every detail she could remember. She recorded 2 separate arguments on a small device she kept in the pocket of her cardigan. She saved security footage from the front porch before it could be erased. And she called a divorce attorney named Monica Hale, a woman with steel in her voice and no patience for men who believed paperwork could be bullied. By the time my mother filed, Scott still had no idea she was already halfway out the door. He found out 2 days later. I was on the road when she called again. This time, she wasn't crying. She sounded terrified in a way that went beyond tears. He had torn through the house like a storm, broken a lamp, smashed a picture frame, ripped drawers out of the bedroom dresser, and thrown their contents across the floor. But it wasn't the yelling that scared her most. It was what happened when he stopped. Because Scott had gone quiet. Men like that always do, eventually. Rage is loud. Real intent rarely is. He stood in the kitchen, according to my mother, with one hand flat on the counter and said, almost conversationally, "If you go through with this, I will make both of you regret it for the rest of your lives." That was the moment I stopped treating him like an ugly domestic problem and started seeing him for what he really was, a predator losing control. I got my mother out that same night, not back to my house, somewhere cleaner than that, somewhere unconnected. A furnished place owned by a former teammate's cousin 2 counties over, rented under a different name, with cameras at the entrance and neighbors who minded other people's business in exactly the right way. Scott vanished for a week after that. No calls returned. No sign of him at mediation. No clear pattern. Just the kind of silence that feels less like peace and more like a held breath. Then things started happening. My mother's old car, parked outside a friend's house, came back with both passenger side tires slashed. A brick went through the front window of the rental property she had used only once. Someone spray-painted "liar" across the garage door in red. And then the messages began. Not to her, to me. Different numbers, burner accounts, emails created and discarded the same day. Short messages, all built to do the same thing. "I know where she sleeps. You can't watch her forever." People make mistakes when they're tired. I didn't answer a single one. I documented every message and forwarded them to Detective Marcus Reed, the lead investigator assigned to the stalking complaint Monica helped us file. Reed was patient, thorough, and honest in a way I respected. He never promised what he couldn't deliver. He told me the truth. Until Scott crossed a line the department could prove in a way a judge wouldn't ignore, there were limits. Fine, I thought. Then I would make sure that when he crossed it completely. What almost no one in my town knew was that my house had not been designed like an ordinary house. When I bought it, I had already spent years learning what it cost to feel safe only by luck. So I built something else. Stronger locks, reinforced frame, cameras with overlapping angles, motion alerts tied directly to my phone, exterior lights that could flood the entire yard in seconds, a back room solid enough to hold if it ever needed to. Paranoia, some people would call it. People who had never needed it always say that. My next-door neighbor, Ben Harper, noticed changes in me before anyone else did. Ben was retired fire department, the kind of man who watered his driveway in summer and watched the block without appearing to. One afternoon, he caught me standing by my mailbox, scanning the street a second longer than normal. "You expecting trouble?" he asked. I looked at him for a moment and decided how much to say. "Maybe," I answered. He studied my face, then nodded once. "You need an extra set of eyes? You let me know." That's the thing about good people. They don't always ask for the whole story before they step closer. I asked, quietly. And over the following weeks, 3 households on my street became part of a net Scott never saw. No heroics, no speeches, just adults paying attention. A white pickup parked too long? Call me. A strange man walking the block at midnight? Call me. A car passing twice with its lights off? Definitely call me. My mother, meanwhile, began the slow work of becoming herself again. She started therapy twice a week. She slept with the lamp on for a while. She checked every lock 3 times before bed. Sometimes she apologized for being afraid, which broke my heart more than the fear itself. I kept telling her the same thing. You are not weak because someone worked hard to make you feel small. Little by little, she changed. She started choosing things again. What to eat, what to wear, where to sit in a room, which road to take into town. Those decisions sound small until you watch someone reclaim them one by one. Then, in July, Scott made his mistake. He called me directly. Not from a blocked number, not through an app, from a gas station outside my county, probably believing movement made him untraceable. His voice was flat, almost cheerful. "I know where you live, Claire." I leaned against my kitchen counter and let him hear nothing in my silence. He kept talking. "You think hiding her makes you brave?" Still, I said nothing. Then he gave me exactly what I needed. "I'm coming for what's mine." He hung up before I could answer. I didn't need to. I sent the recording to Detective Reed and told him the truth. He was done testing limits. He was going to escalate, and soon. After that, I stopped sleeping deeply, not because I was afraid, because I was ready. There's a difference. The night he came was a Tuesday, humid, windless, the kind of summer night where the air feels too still, like the world is waiting. At 11:43 p.m., my driveway camera sent an alert. Dark sedan, lights off, engine idling. I was upstairs, already awake. I watched him through the feed first, then through the front window. Scott sat in the car for 20 seconds, maybe 30, working himself up, building his own courage. Then he stepped out. Even from a distance, I could see the looseness in his movement. He'd been drinking, or pretending alcohol made him dangerous. He looked at my house like he was imagining fear on the other side of the walls. What he was actually looking at was evidence. I texted Reed one word: now. His team was already closer than Scott knew. Then I waited. Scott came up the walk fast, hit the porch, and tried the knob first. Locked. Of course. He stepped back and kicked the door once. The frame held. He cursed, louder this time, then drove his shoulder into it. On the second hit, the outer trim cracked. On the third, the door gave enough for him to force himself inside. By then, I was standing in the living room, not hidden, not shaking, just waiting. He stumbled over the threshold, breathing hard, a shape full of anger and bad decisions. For one brief second, he didn't understand what he was seeing. I don't think I matched the picture he had built in his head. He expected panic, maybe pleading, maybe a woman backing away. Instead, he found me standing still in the half-light with my hands empty and my eyes on his. He sneered, but there was uncertainty in it now. "You think you can stop me?" I looked at him the way I had looked at armed men overseas, the way you look at a threat when you have already accepted what must happen next. Then I answered. "No," I said. "I think you already lost." He charged. Angry men almost always do the same thing when they believe size is enough. They come forward, wide, loud, and committed, relying on force to compensate for lack of control. It works against people who freeze. I have never been one of those people. I moved toward him, not away. That disrupted everything. His balance, his timing, his certainty. I caught his arm before the full swing developed, turned with his momentum instead of fighting it, drove his weight past his own center, and put him face first into my hallway floor so hard the breath shot out of him in one ugly grunt. It took less than 5 seconds. No drama, no brawl, no desperate exchange of blows. Just training meeting stupidity. He tried to push up, and I locked his arm tighter. "Don't," I said. He did anyway. That earned him pain, not injury. Just enough to make the lesson clear. He went still. For a second, all I could hear was his breathing against the hardwood and the distant pulse in my own ears. Then he turned his head as far as he could and forced out the question every bully asks when fear finally changes sides. "Who the hell are you?" I leaned down just enough for him to hear me clearly. "I'm the daughter of the woman you should have left alone." Outside, sirens rose. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just real. The sound of a door closing on a future he thought he still controlled. When Detective Reed entered with 2 uniformed officers, Scott actually looked relieved for half a second, like maybe official procedure could protect him from what he had just learned. Reed took one look at the broken frame, the camera panel, Scott on the floor under my grip, and gave me the smallest nod. "Claire," he said, "step back." I did. They cuffed Scott where he lay. He started talking immediately, the way weak men do when consequence arrives. He said I attacked him, said he came to talk, said this was all a misunderstanding. Reed let him talk. The cameras had already said more than he ever could. As they walked him out, Scott looked back at me once. Not with rage, with confusion. That was the part he never recovered from. Not the arrest, not the broken plan, the confusion. The reality that the woman he thought he was hunting had never once been prey. When the house finally went quiet again, my hands started shaking. Adrenaline is funny that way. It lets you borrow calm and demands payment later. I called my mother. She answered on the first ring. "Claire?" "It's over," I told her. "He came here. He's in custody." There was a long silence. Then I heard her cry in a way she had not allowed herself to cry for months. Not from panic, from release. "Are you hurt?" she asked. Even then, even after everything, that was still her first instinct. "No," I said softly. "I'm okay." And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I believed we both might actually be. The investigation moved quickly after that. Search warrants, storage units, devices, financial records. Detective Reed called me 3 days later with the kind of voice people use when bad suspicions become facts. Scott had been documenting my mother's movements, mine too. Photos, notes, dates, a handgun with no clean registration trail, pills that didn't match any prescription, copies of old messages to former partners, enough to turn one ugly case into several. Then the past came forward. 2 women he had been involved with before my mother gave statements. Both told versions of the same story. Charm first, isolation second, control after that. Violence when control stopped working. One of them said something that stayed with me. He only looked confident when he thought you were afraid. That was him exactly. The trial took almost a year. My mother testified. I will remember that for the rest of my life. She sat upright, hands folded, voice steady, and told the truth without decorating it. Not once did she look down. Not once did she try to make him seem less cruel so the room would be more comfortable. She named what he did. She named what it cost. She named the fear. And then she kept speaking anyway. There are a lot of ways people imagine courage. Most of them are wrong. Courage is not the fight in my hallway. Courage was my mother deciding, while still afraid, that fear would no longer be the organizing principle of her life. Scott was convicted on every major count that mattered: assault, stalking, criminal threats, unlawful entry, harassment, and weapons-related charges tied to the later search. When the sentence came down, he stared straight ahead like the wall might save him if he looked hard enough. It didn't. A year after the trial, my mother bought a small house with pale blue shutters and a porch swing she picked out herself. She planted hydrangeas along the fence and started a flower business she had talked about for years, but never believed she was free enough to build. Now, when I visit, I usually find her in the garden just after sunrise, hands in the soil, face tipped toward the morning light like she belongs there. Because she does. Sometimes we sit on the porch without talking much, just coffee, birds, ordinary air, the kind of peace people underestimate until they've nearly lost it. Not long ago, she looked at me over the rim of her mug and said, "You know, for a while, I thought he took everything from me." I asked her what she thought now. She smiled, small, real. He didn't get the ending. That's the truth of it. People think strength is about overpowering the person who hurt you. Sometimes it is, for a moment. But real strength is what comes after. It's rebuilding. It's choosing peace without confusing it for weakness. It's learning that survival is not the final chapter. It's the beginning of the next one. And if there is one thing I want you to carry from this story, it's this. The moment someone decides they deserve better, the whole future begins to change. Maybe not all at once, maybe not loudly, but permanently. My mother changed her life the day she stopped waiting for Scott to become a better man and started becoming a freer woman. What I did after that mattered, but she was the one who chose the door. She was the one who walked through it.